Unfortunately, all the issues that we're being faced with in this country, whether it be the income disparity, whether it be the Social Security and Medicare battle, whether it be the economy or massive unemployment, all affects young people. At the end of the day, I think the young people are the ones that's been sold the really raw, the really bad set of goods. And so I think Mitt Romney's gonna have to pick somebody that can communicate to young people and tell them why they should not only vote for Mitt Romney, but he's going to be the one to fix the economy, and not only fix the economy, but also, rewrite the wrongs that have been put in by the baby boomers.
I think the young folks who turned out with such enthusiasm, Richard and David, for President Obama must be feeling the pinch of employment. And I reported over the weekend that student loan rates can as much as double July 1 if Congress doesn't take action. What will they do, and how important a voting bloc, David, do you think that they will prove to be this time?
I think they're going to be very important. In the Republican primaries, you haven't seen a lot of under 30 turnout. And I think that it's a demographic that Governor Romney has to think very carefully about. One thing that is discordant between under 30 people right now and President Obama's agenda is that people living in the Facebook, iPod, Twitter age live in a hyper-personalized world. And a lot of the programs that the administration is trying to push are about kind of one society and someone being just one cog in a very large machine. And if Governor Romney can find a way to drive a wedge and say, look, you are an individual, you live in an individualized world, why is the government trying to make you one of many? That could be a very compelling argument for the young vote.
Ron Paul seemed to have some success, Richard, with that young crowd. Will Mitt Romney, with all the resources that he has, effectively work social media and other means of communication that work so well with that demographic?
I mean, I think the jury's still out on that, Jamie, but I think there's a broader issue here. It's beyond Twitter and who can engage young people on Twitter and Facebook. It's really about the issues. The truth of the matter is that America spends 2.4 times more on our senior citizens than they do on young people. Young people have been sort of sold a really raw set of goods by baby boomers. They've been sort of, baby boomers have said instead of making the generation better for young people, they've actually made it worse by helping themselves out and helping make sure that they get Social Security, whereas then young people aren't faced with those same realities. Young people make less than older folks doing the same professions. Young people have a harder time getting employment even after college, and the cost of the university just continues to skyrocket. And I think young people are going to go to the polls, and they're going to have to make a decision based upon what's going to do the best for their pocket, what's going to do the best for their future. And I think that's going to be the argument that has to be articulated, whether it's articulated on Facebook or Meet the Press or Fox News Sunday. Some candidate's going to have to articulate to young people how they're going to recorrect the wrongs that have been put in them by the current generation in charge.
What about the current administration? They're experiencing all of these things now.
And they might feel a sense that the administration has failed them to a certain extent because they worry about the entitlement programs that haven't been fixed that can potentially lead this huge load of debt on our generation going forward. And they're going to say, okay, President Obama hasn't really fixed this the way that people have been talking about it needs to be fixed for years now. Maybe Governor Romney, who has more experience in the private sector in creating programs like this, maybe he would do a better job.
Maybe.
I just don't, I mean, I beg to differ here, Jamie. I think it's pretty simple. I think what we've seen members of the House of Representatives from both parties, what they've both done is they've said we'll have a socialized system for all those who are 55 and over, and everybody who's under 55, they're sort of faced with the crucial hard reality of capitalism. And that's why you've seen the Occupy Wall Street movement. And that's why you've seen folks occupy from Oakland to Sydney, Australia, because no matter across the world, young people are saying we've had enough of you looking out for yourself and not looking out for the best interest of the future of the country.
Richard, I don't think the down with capitalism argument is going to resonate too well with young people.
I mean, I beg to differ. We've seen young people occupy all across this country. We've seen young people change governments in places like Egypt, in places like Tunisia, in places like Libya. So the truth of the matter is that young people are angry and they're frustrated, and they're going to need a political solution that's just beyond rhetoric.
They want a political solution, yes, that's beyond rhetoric. They want to address the problems of the day without necessarily tearing apart the system that's made the country great.
Well, has Mitt Romney presented a system to them as an alternative? Should he be more specific than you feel he has been?
I think traditional Republican talking points, which have been kind of made fun of in this general election campaign, are the same things that we need to go back to. Lower taxes. We need to reform health care.
And that resonates with young people, those topics?
It's harder to get them to resonate because it's harder to make a soundbite that sounds sexy about why lower taxes are going to create jobs. It's much easier to grab somebody by their heartstrings with a story about someone who's really fallen on hard times and make you feel like the government needs to expand in order to help them.
Another Joe the plumber?
Joe the plumber, well, he's going to be a candidate for Congress. He's going to be articulating his own platform come November. But I do think that Governor Romney is going to be tested with making sure that the traditional points that have made this country strong can be articulated in a way that do appeal to young people.
Come on, now, David, I disagree again here. I think we could try, I mean, young people can try those shoes of the old ideals and the old policies and see if it fits, but I guarantee you that that shoe will not fit. It's just that simple. We've seen that shoe for 8 years under George W. Bush, and we've seen an increase in government spending under George W. Bush, and that is where the that's where the millennial generation was sold the dirty bag of goods.
But many of them weren't even of voting age then. I mean, let's face it, you really think they're going to be able to think back to the George Bush years, whether or not that argument is valid or not?
Well, I think you're completely right, Jamie. They weren't voting age back then, and sadly, you know, even though they weren't voting age, the folks that have been in charge of this government, who should have been trustees for the next generation, just weren't. This is the first generation, and the baby boomers is the first generation in history that only looked out for themselves and not looked out for millennials. And now millennials are stuck with a really soggy bag of goods. We're stuck with debt that we can't, unbearable debt, not only in our personal lives, but also in the government. And that debt, you can't. I don't think Obama can be the only person blamed for that, because George W. Bush ran the bill up. I mean, we have to remember when he took office, we had a surplus. And I don't think young people forget that.
I agree with Richard. George Bush spent too much money, Barack Obama spent too much money, and we need a president who's going to actually reduce spending. And I think that if you look at President Obama's record versus Governor Romney, you have someone who's going to reduce spending, more likely to reduce spending.
I mean, I don't know about that one, David. I think what we've seen from Mitt Romney is he's quicker to fire than he is to hire. With his work in Bain Capital, he really doesn't have a youth message going into this current election. And the only message that he has is one of cutting taxes. But we all know.
Richard, what do you expect President Obama to say then? How is he going to address the spending issue, the no jobs issue for graduating college seniors, let's say? And when should he start talking about those things specifically if that group was with him before and has a basis of comparison of where their life is now and where it was then? Plus, many of their parents are out of work or losing their homes. They're getting it from all sides.
Well, Jamie, you're completely right. I think there's only so much that the president can do, given that when he took this economy over, we were not only in a horrible state, but he was faced with tons and tons and tons of issues. He had to shore up Social Security. He had to, regrow our economy. But on top of that, I think what we've seen from the president is where he can advocate for young people. He's done that. He's went out and he said we need to increase Pell Grant. We need to increase Pell Grant provisions. He's went out and said we need to put young people back on their parents' health care insurance. And we've seen the contrast from Republicans. Republicans are willing to go against this health care law, knowing that if the courts decide to strike it down, 2.5 million young people will not have health care. Republicans are willing to hold up a vote on keeping the student loan interest rate at the current margins, and they're willing to hold that up for their own political gains. They're willing to hurt the millennial generation. They're willing to hurt the future of this country to make political gains, and that's the problem.
David?
Well, I do hope that the health care laws struck down and we have a chance to revisit the debate on that and actually come up with a bill that's going to cover more people without burdening the millennial generation with unnecessary debt. It's going to be very interesting.